When you're reading Chinese diplomatic language, words really matter because the meaning is almost always deeper than what's on the surface. In March, the second time, Trump imposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods. China, in a statement, signaled strong dissatisfaction, so they weren't happy. But then, those tariffs ramped up by 34%. And the language changed. China now firmly opposed US tariffs. Now, this might seem like a small thing, but it's not. It conveys a much more serious level of disapproval that goes beyond something China's willing to tolerate and more towards something it sees as unacceptable. And yet, still a note of conciliation at the end, a plea to properly resolve differences with trading partners through fair negotiation. But now, it's all different.
Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade. I have great respect for China, but they can't do this.
When Trump threatened an additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods as punishment for China retaliating against previous US tariffs, this time China didn't only respond with firm opposition as it had before. It went a step further, calling the US escalation a mistake on top of a mistake. And these characters here are zhe. That's how you say extortion in Chinese.
中方必将奉陪到底。
What I'm trying to underline here is that this is remarkably blunt language.
They are much more comfortable these days in using language to signal political discontent and political anger.
The posture is defiant, certainly more hostile and resolute than China has been so far. And it hints at what the country is willing to do to stand up to Trump and where it sees its place in the new world order. China has retaliated against new US tariffs in many ways now. There have been successive tariffs on US energy and agriculture, a broad-based tariff on all American goods, now going up to 84%. Restrictions on critical mineral exports, investigations into and constraints on American companies. But China has other levers too. Consider how it can apply political pressure in arenas that seem to matter very much to Donald Trump.
As of today, TikTok is back. I think we would have a joint venture with the people from TikTok. So I have a warm spot in my heart for TikTok.
This administration feels very strongly that TikTok, hugely popular in the US, but owned and controlled by a Chinese company, that its American operations should be American-owned.
The president seems optimistic, saying he's working with multiple bidders.
Do you think there's going to be a deal on TikTok soon?
There could be. We're dealing with 4 different groups, and a lot of people want it.
But according to a New York Times report this week, even though a deal looked close, under the plan, new investors would own 50% of a new American TikTok entity, while Chinese owners would retain less than 20%. And Beijing seemed to be comfortable with the idea. That all changed very suddenly. And the New York Times reported the deal had hit a wall.
Reporters that we had a deal pretty much with TikTok. Not a deal, but pretty close. And then China changed the deal because of tariffs.
Beijing uses a multi-pronged economic coercion playbook, and they're deploying the entire kit against the United States.
But that's just one political example. Consider how much economic heft China seems prepared and willing to use. You remember all that talk a while ago about Trump wanting to establish a sovereign wealth fund?
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. I think in a short period of time, we'd have one of the biggest funds.
The idea was to basically create a giant government piggy bank, except they wouldn't just stuff it full of coins and cash and tax revenue. They'd also plug it right into the stock market. They'd invest that money. So far as I can tell, that never really got off the ground, because I don't know how a country perennially in debt gets the money to suddenly invest on world markets. But you know which country has the biggest overall trade surplus, fueling one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world? That's right, China.
They basically have the potential for unlimited intervention in the market.
Yes, the same sovereign wealth fund that early invested in Alibaba, helping turn it into a $200 billion competitor with Amazon. It is also using its considerable resources to prop up Chinese stock markets.
They have intervened in the stock market in the past to keep prices from falling, and they can certainly do so again.
It's buying Chinese shares, big time, with the very explicit goal of stabilizing Chinese businesses facing American tariffs that have gone up 100% in just a couple of months. And China's central bank, they're pumping money into this too, providing loans to secure those additional investments. And the impact of that? Chinese markets, which took a huge tumble on Monday, they've stabilized and are slowly rebounding. So you take all of this together and a picture emerges of China digging in. But digging in for what exactly? China appears to be of the belief that the US, with Trump in the White House, is very much in the process of undermining its own global standing.
China benefits from how the global economic order works right now. If many economies are in trouble, then that's not going to be good for China. But politically, rhetorically, Beijing likely sees an opening.
China is using this crisis to portray itself as a global force in terms of trade, but also a much more reliable partner than the United States.
This is our globe. An imperfect world. There is violence, hegemonism, greed.
That is either PR or propaganda, depending on how you see such things, from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, posted the very same day as Trump's sweeping Liberation Day tariffs. And it states quite clearly the moral choice China wants to convince the rest of the world that it faces.
Suppression, provocation, tariffs. Do you want to live in a world like this? Or a world like this? No war. Security for all. Equality among nations.
China has been working for years to undercut the liberal international order and to argue, particularly among developing countries, that China is a better partner than the United States and other democracies because China doesn't make demands. It doesn't demand that you get your human rights regime in order, that you improve government governance, that you deal with your environmental challenges. China will just show up with cash.
And there is a pragmatism to China's approach. Since Trump's first term, Chinese companies have found ways to shift production, to skirt Trump's tariffs. Just to give you one example, more than half of Cambodia's factories are now Chinese owned. And the US now runs a huge trade deficit with Cambodia. And China is now the largest trading partner for more than 120 countries worldwide, running massive surpluses with the US, the UK, the EU, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, India, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore.
China has more options than the United States. If their exports shrink a little bit, they can partially offset that by increasing domestic demand through more government expenditures, tax cuts, other kinds of policies that are readily available. The United States, on the other hand, does not have so many options because a lot of the things we buy from China, we can't get anywhere else.
To put it all very simply, China is aware of its influence.
China's answer is, we should work for an equal and orderly multipolar world.
When China addressed the world in Munich back in February, that same venue where, by the way, US Vice President J.D. Vance excoriated world leaders.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you.
But as the US was seen to be burning bridges, China was trying to build them, projecting itself as an alternative to the US, as a kind of champion of the globalized economy that Trump and his administration seemed keen to dismantle.
Here I want to make 4 points. First, it is important to advocate equal treatment. Second, it is important to respect international rule of law. Third, it is important to practice multilateralism. Fourth, it is important to pursue openness and mutual benefit.
China has been trying to position itself as a reasonable, benevolent, potential world leader, providing an alternative to liberal democratic ideals and dominance, and that a Chinese-led world order will be an equal accepting place for all types of governments.
China's challenge, of course, is to overcome its own image. To many, it is no hero standing up to a bully. It is itself a coercive force, an authoritarian regime that uses its military and manufacturing might to get its way. China has crushed dissent in Hong Kong. It actively threatens the sovereignty of Taiwan. It has militarized disputed waters, and it stands accused of human rights violations, foreign interference, international property theft. So, is this the alternative to Donald Trump the world seeks? And it's worth remembering, China had its own problems to deal with long before Trump came around for round two. A declining birth rate, a sluggish economy. But here's another thing experts told us. China has a tolerance for pain. Its leaders are not judged by surveys or polls or a population that can simply vote it out of power. And if this trade war between China and the US continues to spiral out of control, there will be pain on all sides.